Bibliophiles of the internet, my name's Adriana, and today I'm here to finally bring you my November wrap-up. Initially, I thought I would only read maybe 2 or 3 books in November, and I was excited about dialing it back because I thought to myself, wow, maybe now I'll actually have an easy 5-minute wrap-up. But things rarely turn out the way I want, and apparently I can't stop reading books. Who knew? In the interest of full disclosure, the first book I started in November and quickly DNF'd was Like a River Glorious by Ray Carson. I read Walk on Earth a Stranger in like 2015, which is a lifetime ago in book years, and I do remember enjoying that story, but of course I'm more keyed into reading things critically now, and within a few pages it really hit me that I was reading a story about settler colonialism from the perspective of the settlers, the colonizers. I was reading a story about people moving west, forcibly claiming land that didn't belong to them, and mistreating native peoples in the process, and fine, that's an undeniable part of history, but at the same time I feel like if you're gonna go there, you need to accurately portray what Native Americans experienced, and I didn't feel like this series was doing their history justice. There's so much in the way of misinformation and misrepresentation, especially when it comes to Native people and their history, and I just didn't want to feed into that. Even though it's only one part of the story, as a reader, I shouldn't be expected to overlook that in favor of a mildly interesting YA Western with minor fantasy elements. At this point in my life, it's too big of an ask. I also found a really great article and blog post written by Native scholar Debbie Reese detailing every questionable moment in regards to Native history one by one in the first book. Those will be linked down below, as well as my brief Goodreads review. After that, I really needed a palate cleanser, and what better way to redirect my energy than to read Own Voice's native fiction. So I finally picked up The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich. This book is so incredibly dynamic. It's a blend of mystery and coming of age about a character named Joe who lives with his family on an Ojibwe reservation in North Dakota, and the book opens when his mother has just been violently assaulted and raped, and she barely makes it home alive. She sinks into a state of extreme depression and trauma and refuses to speak to anyone, and Joe and his father, who is a judge, are trying to piece together who did this and whether or not they'll be able to prosecute. Joe is frustrated that the case is so drawn out, so he and his friends decide to return to the scene of the crime and look for clues themselves, but of course what they stumble into is so much bigger than they expect. This was such an immersive, slow-burning reading experience. Even though it has that element of mystery, it's not an action-packed thriller by any means. Instead, the story focuses more on the everyday, mundane goings-on of life on the reservation. It's more about Joe and his family trying to find their footing again and find a way to accept that this is their new normal, this is their life. And that's what makes this story so engaging, I think, because the book asks, how can you accept trauma as a normal part of your life? How can you sit with it every day and just move on? And it's so powerful to see these characters literally returning to the site of trauma over and over again and asking themselves, is there something I'm missing? Is there another way I can handle this? The story also exposes how the reservation's judiciary systems are at an extreme disadvantage. It all comes down to the limited power that the US government has deigned to grant reservations, and when a crime doesn't fall within those limits, there is very little they can do about it. There comes a point in this story where the characters are trying to figure out exactly where the crime happened, like where the rapist was physically positioned on the land. If he was just a few inches this way, it would be tribal jurisdiction. If he was a foot to the right, the case would be left to the police of a nearby city. If he was a hair to the north, it would be sent to the state. If it was committed just a step further, it would be in no man's land. There's all these loopholes when it comes to reservations being able to prosecute, and all these loopholes exist, plain and simple, to protect criminals, especially non-native criminals who are often the biggest offenders when it comes to crimes committed against native people, and you get to see that very real frustration and the consequences of those loopholes play out on the page. And the story also explores how young men in particular are taught to see women as objects, as things they are entitled to use and hurt as they see fit. At first I was wondering about why I had to read about teenage boys jerking off in the woods, or how they wanted to bury their faces in the breasts of the local gas station worker and have sex with anything that walks. I wondered if it was just boys will be boys type stuff, but it actually all came back. There's this incredible moment where Joe totally fucks up, where he participates in something he wasn't ready to take responsibility for, and he totally breaks down. He realizes how disgusting and gross he's become, how all these long months when he's wondered what kind of monster could attack his mother like that and treat another human like that, all the while he was going down that same path of objectifying women as a way to distance himself from having to take responsibility for their pain. It's this really poignant moment when Joe realizes he has to actively work against being that person to save someone else from having to experience the pain he and his family have been dealt. This was a difficult read, but an amazing read, and I gave it 4.5 stars. On a very different note, after that I read the first issue of Fence, illustrated by Joanna the Mad and written by C.S. Picat. This is a new queer sports comic that has taken over my life. It's about this teenage boy named Nicholas who is an outsider in the world of competitive fencing. He comes from a less privileged background and lacks formal training, and at his first competition he's placed against Seiji Katayama, the most prolific, skilled fencer in their age bracket. What an amazing start to this series. C.S. Picot has talked a lot about how she was inspired not only by the fencing lessons she's been taking for years, but also by sports anime and manga, one of my favorite subgenres, and that influence definitely shows. There's something so pure, fresh, and invigorating about how this comic shows fencing and how the sport extends beyond practice, beyond the arena. Single issues are very short, but I was impressed by how deeply these pages let me see into Nicholas's life and background. I felt so much for him because fencing, like many sports, is a world of privilege, and it takes a lot of money and resources just to be able to keep up. You can really see everything he's been through, not even necessarily to win, but just to have a chance. And I really love the hate-to-love rivalry that's being set up between Nicholas and Seiji because there's so much delicious tension there, and I know they're gonna make me feel all the things. I gave issue number 1 5 stars. Then from my library, I read volumes 5, 6, and 7 of Boku no Hero Academia, or My Hero Academia by Horikoshi Kohei. A while back, I did a brief Manga Monday video about the series, so if you want a detailed synopsis of the story and my overall thoughts on the series, that will be linked down below for you to check out. These volumes finished out the sports festival arc and began the final exams arc, which have been two of my favorites in this series. What draws me to this series is the way it shows superpowers in a humble, realistic way. Yes, these students are born with extraordinary abilities, but that doesn't mean they're equipped to just take on the world. Just because they have certain skills doesn't mean they don't have room to grow and things to learn about themselves. And I like the way the series explores how power and fortitude come in different levels, sizes, and shapes. You can be physically strong but weak emotionally and mentally, and it's really about each individual student closing those gaps in their own way. And it's cool the way the story doesn't discredit or minimize less conventional powers. There are those hotshot students with highly sought-after powers, but there's also students with powers that are more quiet and less destructive, powers that require a deep understanding of strategy, and those students get to prove their worth as well. It's a really wonderful series. I can't say enough good things about it. I gave these 3 volumes 4.5 stars or above. Then for Tome Topple, I read It by Stephen King, which is a raging dumpster fire that is a disgusting mess. I just uploaded a 15-minute book talk video about that, and I will not spend 1 second more talking about this trash, so you can go check that out if you would like. Penultimately, I listened to 2 wonderful audiobooks, books 3 and 4 in the How to Train Your Dragon series by Cressida Cowell, read by David Tennant. As I said in my last wrap-up, these books are about the adventures of Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III, heir to the Hairy Hooligan Viking tribe, and just the most unlikely hero you will ever meet. He's a very untraditional, unconventional, unexpected kind of Viking. He's scrawny and shy, extremely passive and non-confrontational, which doesn't really bode well for him as a future Viking chief. He also has a knack for getting himself into tremendous amounts of trouble, like when he and his hunting dragon are captured by Romans and How to Speak Dragonese, or when he has to steal a potato from a particularly murderous Viking tribe in order to save his best friend from Vorpintitis, and how to cheat a dragon's curse. At the time I'm filming this, I'm much further into the series, and I have to say I'm loving every second of it. You can really see everything coming together. You can see Hiccup's legend as a Viking hero really taking shape in the way he empowers himself and other underdogs to find new ways to succeed through bypassing what's expected and focusing on what they can do in that moment. You see him using these skills that his family and his tribe have branded as unnatural and unsavory to really make a difference and pull off extraordinary feats. Hiccup's willingness to open himself up to the unknown, his respect for the process of discovery, is what really enables him to do what he has to do and to also unify Vikings, tribes, and dragons alike. This is such an outstanding series, and David Tennant brings it to life with his unparalleled narration. I gave both of these books 4 stars. And finally, my poetry collection for the month of November was Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings by Joy Harjo. This is a brilliant collection of poems that blends together native history, values, stories, and imagery with modern, universal sentiments about connectedness and purpose, and Harjo also integrates her relationship with jazz music. This was one of the most compelling poetry collections I've read all year. It feels so organic and easy, so far from contrived, and with each verse, that ease and clarity really settles over you and makes you feel so receptive. As I said, the collection explores connectedness, how important it is to reclaim that which rightfully belongs to us, how we cannot be defined or limited by what the history books say or don't say, how our purpose as humans is to light the way and lead others out of the dark. And it's really about how all these ideas are most especially true for Native people who have been disrespected and who continue to be disrespected in so many ways. It's a fantastic collection that unearths the atrocities of history we have to confront, but at the same time, it's bigger than pain, it's bigger than anger, it's about forgiveness forgiveness and sharing burdens and actively working towards love. I loved every page of this, and I can't wait to read more poetry from Joy Harjo. I gave this collection 5 stars. So those are all the books I read in November. All in all, a very successful reading month where I met and even surpassed my own expectations. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and also which books you would like to fit in before the end of 2017. But that is everything I have for this wrap up today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!